Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 251st Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the question, do political conventions add anything to the presidential selection process, candidate selection process? Today's discussion begins with Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired member of the faculty of Wadsworth Senior High School, followed by Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Then, well, Tom Finley's not here. And finally, Susan Hanlon, current member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron. Patty, do you think the political conventions are an important part of the process of selecting a candidate for president of the United States?
Yes, I do. Now, the importance of them has changed a great deal over the years. In the early 1900s, for example, when they would go to the conventions, they really had no idea who the candidate would be. I remember there was one in the early 1900s, and I can't remember, but the two leaders for the party that went in ended up not being chosen because they would do these votes and over and over and over again, and the delegates would vote for different people. I remember as a kid watching conventions and not knowing who was going to get the nomination until after the votes were taken. And I say votes because they quite often had to vote more than one time in order to have a selection. Now, that's not the case now. In the last number of conventions, on both the Republican and the Democratic side, there's been a presumptive nominee. And if there were any delegates that were supposed to be loyal or give votes to another candidate, in most cases, those different competitors would release their delegates and allow them to vote for the presumptive winner. So it makes it a one vote matter and more ceremonial than anything else. So I guess that purpose of the convention is gone, but I think there are other purposes that are very valued. For example, it gives us an idea or gives us an introduction to the president's policies, where they can present them, where they can have surrogates present them. They give us a chance in many cases to meet the vice presidential candidates, not only their political beliefs, but also learning about their families, where they come from, what they stand for, so that they are presented to the public. We know J.D. Vance, but outside of Ohio, most voters didn't. So that was a chance for the Republicans to introduce him at his convention. The same thing with the Democratic convention with Tim Walz. He was introduced. You learned about his family, where he came from, what he stood for at these conventions. I think another thing is that you get, and this is important, I think, you get an opportunity to learn more about members of the party that are not running for president. It gives you kind of an idea of the depth of each party and where they stand on different issues, dependent upon where they're located within the states. In some areas, immigration may be the most important issue. In another area, gun control may be the most important issue, or crime, or reproductive rights, or whatever the case may be. But you learn about all of these candidates, and that's important to know the depth of your party. Famously in 2004, no one outside of Illinois really knew who Barack Obama was until he spoke at the 2004 Democratic Convention. And it was based upon that. That was considered to be his launch pad, which made him a national figure. And by the time 2008 came around, he was the presidential nominee. And I think that you see that by watching the conventions. Now, I did watch both of them from beginning to end, and I wasn't bored. I was interested in the policies, and I think as informed voters, as an informed member of a political party, I think it's important to understand where your party stands on various issues. And you can learn all of this by watching the conventions.
Do you think, though, that in getting to know the different party members, that you're really getting an accurate portrayal of their beliefs and ambitions and so forth?
Well, as much as you do anytime you hear a politician speak. I
Yeah.
mean, if you go to a rally for one president or another, you're hearing the same speech every time. And if you think that that's going to be more honest than what they're saying at the convention, I doubt it. So I think as much as you can, you are getting an idea, and you can nitpick on those issues later, I guess.
Yeah. Susan, what are your thoughts?
Well,
Wait, I did it to Bryan again.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to be back last. Go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah. Sorry, Bryan.
That's okay, John. There must be something that I've done in the past that is stuck in your memory.
Just
there,
being
John.
you.
No,
Just
it's
being
the order that you appear on the monitor.
Oh, well, if Susan would like to go first.
No, go ahead.
I kind of agree with Patty, but I disagree in that it's a 3-day commercial for each party. I read a book that's surprising about Harry Truman. And Harry Truman went to the convention not knowing that he was going to be the nominee. And there was a lot of backroom negotiating. There was, it was up to the wire. I don't know if you would call it a contested convention, but conventions used to be where they went and decided who the president was going to be. Now I feel like the cake's already been baked.
Oh, yeah.
It's a sideshow. I agree that you get to know the different people and all that kind of stuff, but it just seems like it's an infomercial for 3 days, and they feed the base, got a lot of red meat in there. But the excitement, I was kind of excited for the Democratic convention because there was a possibility. Unfortunately, Patty was not able to vote for the president. They just sort of coordinated Kamala. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but
You're
please.
not. It's
Kamala.
Kamala. I'm sorry. Now, what I've heard people say it a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say the presumptive, the vice president of the United States, they pretty much inserted her without giving, and this created a brouhaha with a lot of people. You didn't hear about those people at the Democratic National Convention because they'd already sort of muffled their voices and sort of pushed them to the side. But I think that would have been a perfect opportunity for some of these other contenders, like a Bernie Sanders or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to step up and to give their pitch and make the best person win. I'd like to see that even in a Republican. I just felt like we went to the convention. Everybody knew who it was going to be. There were no surprises, no dark horses. I just like to see more of a horse race to the very end.
Like the old days.
What's that?
Like the old days.
Like the old, yeah. Let's go back to when they were really these seat of your pants conventions. You bring everybody in. So many people can vote, and there was a lot of horse trading that went on, and the right person bubbled to the top, and everybody had to coalesce around that person. Now, it's once again, it's just more of an infomercial. It's great that we hear all about the different people and some of the up and comers and that kind of stuff, but I think we need to put a little more excitement, sort of like, let's have a little, title fight here, and let's have some people get in the ring and duke it out, and really have a convention where people are deciding who the next, who their nominee is going to be. But that doesn't play well on TV. Everybody likes to see, they want to know the end at the beginning, and that's pretty much what you had. I'd be interested in hearing what Patty's take is off of, after Susan's done, about being disenfranchised. Patty was disenfranchised. She did not get to vote for who the next nominee would be. Now, she might not agree with that, but that's just the take of some of the folks on the internet. So that's my opinion.
Okay, Susan, now it's your turn.
Okay, let's see what I can add to this. So to sort of start off on the point that Bryan ended with, the notion that Kamala, she has never in the presidential process actually gotten a single vote. She's never been on a ballot. And that brings up the sort of a little bit of a historical perspective. At one time, there were no conventions and there were no primaries. It was just, I don't know how they came up with, who was going to run for president. And of course, there was really, the candidates were not supposed to campaign. That was considered kind of uncouth. And then, in the early 1900s, we started to have primaries, but you still had, and they started with these conventions. What changed was how important the primaries became, and how so many states switched to, pledged or bound delegates instead of the super delegates or the unpledged. And so now, and for a while, like in the 60s, the primaries were kind of just a test run. They were like this notion that we just want to see if this candidate can, who can get the votes. And I forget which state it was, but it was one of the Midwestern states when John Kennedy won. They said, okay, because they were worried he couldn't get elected because he was Catholic. And when he won, a solid Midwestern state, that was when, the powers that be decided, okay, I think he can do it. So that's what they were for a long time, because not all states had primaries. Well, now everybody either has a primary or a caucus, and all these delegates are bound. And yeah, the process is very truncated because, I'll use Nikki Haley for an example. Trump starts to win, and then nobody wants to give her money. So then she doesn't have enough money to continue. And the whole process just stopped, even for Republicans. I think, our primary, we had some good people, but they didn't get to have a chance. And the fact that, all these delegates were bound, if they weren't bound, it could have made the convention interesting. If they were like, okay, you're the delegates to the convention, and you see what the primary did, you saw who got what votes, but you're free to vote however you want. And the only way that the convention would matter anymore in terms of choosing the candidate is if a candidate didn't get a majority of the primary votes. If they didn't get enough of the primaries. So I agree. Although I do think that there was a good reason we went from the back room about deciding to primaries. People wanted a voice, and now through some odd thing, I don't know that I can anybody can fully explain it. It's almost like the primaries have gotten too strong, too meaningful, and so yeah, the nomination process, when states start having, it's to the point now, it's like, what are the two early states? They're small states. They have so much influence because they have their primaries first. And that's what I was annoyed this time with the Republican primary. Ours, I mean, by the time it got to us, no one even cared. It was like, who cares what happens in the primaries? Because ours, I think they should either like be all at the same time. That might make it, more of a horse race or something. But the way they are now, yeah, the primaries have just taken the place of a convention in actually choosing the candidate.
And that's what I was going to ask next. Is the convention really necessary for selecting a candidate? And
No,
it's kind of interesting. I think John Kennedy had an awful lot in common with Barack Obama in that they were both people that came on. John Kennedy in 1956, I think his name was thrown in the hat for vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And he almost made it because he just had tons of charisma.
Yeah.
And actually, he was almost a foregone conclusion for the 1960 candidacy. But the thing is that the convention had nothing to do with his selection other than 1956.
Yeah.
So when he came on the scene, and look at Barack Obama, who the heck knew? I didn't even know how to pronounce his name until he was candidate. But I think it was both candidacies were and the conventions were an important part of both of those candidacies.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it was in the 1980s when the primaries started to get so powerful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you remember who was the?
Well, with the first time Reagan the first time he ran, there had been so many. Gerald Ford had already got, but he still hoped at the convention that he would get the nomination. But the first time he didn't, because Gerald Ford had so many committed delegates.
Yeah, I think with Reagan, I think that people just could not picture a movie actor becoming president.
Right.
that's true. Yeah.
That was, you had to listen to what he had to say and how he said it, all of that before you really took it seriously.
Yeah.
I'd kind of like to respond to some of Brian's questions. First of all, I don't feel disenfranchised in any way, shape, or form. I did have a chance to vote, and I voted for my candidate, but I also voted for the vice president candidate who was on that ticket with him, which was Kamala Harris. And now she's a presidential candidate. So in essence, I did vote for her. Secondly, I was actually voting for delegates, and I was giving my authority to delegates that backed those candidates to make a choice. Now, to assume that my choice is always going to make it is ludicrous, because very honestly, when the first time that Joe Biden appeared on the ballot at running for president in the primaries, I did not vote for him. He was not my choice. He was not my second choice. He wasn't even my third choice. But that's how deep I felt the Democratic Party was, that we had so many different candidates that could live up to that position. So I did not feel disenfranchised. And to even remotely suggest that Robert Kennedy Jr. would be an alternative for me, I know is a snipe, because number one, he wasn't even a Democrat at the time of the convention. He had already switched off to be an independent. And now he's backing Trump. So we know what side he is on. He's not what I would consider a serious Democratic candidate, nor has Bernie Sanders shown any interest in getting back in, and has backed up Kamala Harris in her run. By the way, Brian, I think I can point out a really good reason why you should have watched the convention, because Kamala Harris's nieces did a whole thing on how to pronounce her name. And it was presented, and they said, because many of the pundits are, I think, purposely mispronouncing her name, because they should have figured out in the last year how to do this. But his nieces stated, and I actually have stated this on this program before, that the first part of her name is like a comma that you would use in a sentence. So it's comma and then la. And these two very adorable nieces did an entire presentation. So I could say that a bonus to having watched the Democratic convention is you would have known how to pronounce her name. Secondly, I don't see what's wrong with having a rah big kickoff party for a convention for a presidential.
Then let's just call it that. Let me push back a little bit, because the internet and social media was on fire when they replaced Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And what the narrative is that if the Democratic Party if he had not run or said he was going to run, they would not have run who they did. Because like Susan said, she has never won. She dropped out of the primary when she ran for president. She got no votes. I mean, who drops out before a primary? She's very unpopular, even with her, even with segments of the Democratic Party. And so it was kind of a bait and switch. They put Joe in there and the Biden-Harris team, they ran that hard. And then, they pushed for an early debate, which was uncommon.
Yeah.
Several things around the debate were out of the ordinary. And they realized that they had to show the base that Joe Biden was not what they were saying he was. And they were saying he was sharp, he was this, he was that, and the other. And it was a real awakening, because several days after, nobody could stop talking. Even the talking heads that fall in the Democratic Party, they could not believe that this is what they were stuck with. And so to just get her in the right position without going through a very competitive process, that's what they were saying. Now, whether I believe that or not, that could be somewhat conspiratorial, but it makes a lot of sense when you deal with someone that has never even been through a primary,
Right.
never been on the ballot, and is very unpopular. People don't like to hear that, but there's a lot of voices out there that aren't even Republican aligned. They are not happy with this, a little bit. They're calling it a bait and switch, because they would have never gone for this if they knew what they were going to end up with. So that I'm just throwing that out there.
I know, but the major criticism is not coming from Democrats. It's coming from Republicans who are upset because she is running. No, I'm telling you what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And that is, the fact that she's never had a vote. Donald Trump never had a vote until he did run into a primary. I mean, I don't understand quite that.
The point.
Plus, she had been voted on before in primaries as senator and for
not
positions.
Not for president. That's a big difference.
Well, not for president, but she had run for the office. It is not uncommon for different candidates for president to drop off or to drop out, and she decided to go and support someone else. She saw that the way it was going, it didn't work for her. But that doesn't mean
she's to me, she's a very untested like the point of the primaries used to be to test the candidates. She's very lucky. I agree with Bryan. I think
I agree that she is lucky. I just don't find her.
If he had said from the very beginning, I'm not running for another term, I seriously doubt that she would have gotten the nomination. I mean, she just has to be sitting there going, whoa, what happened?
She didn't even
that may be true.
Yeah.
That she wouldn't have gotten it, but
she wouldn't have gotten it.
And I think the way that it was handled, as far as when Joe dropped out and then she came in, was much, much better for the party than going to the convention and having a brokered convention where you had a lot of contention, a lot of infighting for who has the job. It couldn't have gone smoother. So as far as the party was concerned, I think this worked out for the best for them. And that is what we have
Yeah.
now.
But see, the thing is, it goes back to the point that, you know, in Harry Truman's day, several people showed up at the convention thinking that they might just be the presidential
Right.
Yeah.
candidate.
Right.
And there was, I mean, it was bare knuckled. And
Yeah.
maybe when you avoid that type thing, you know, competition rises to the top when the going gets tough. And I just don't believe that there was any toughness about this. They were looking for the easiest possible way to jettison Joe and to put somebody in there that could use the money and that was already, you know, already on the signs. They even had T-shirts 2 days after the guy dropped out. They already had T-shirts and signs.
That's not
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
I mean, come on, Patty.
That's
Well,
that's not hard.
talk about
But, you know, those are
T-shirts,
good
didn't
points. So I mean,
they had
right,
T-shirts about 10 minutes after Donald Trump got shot with that picture on.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The T-shirts can
The
come up.
whole, yeah, the convention is just a giant pep rally. And, you know, I mean, that's all it is. And at least the Democrats wait. It's been traditional to wait until the convention to announce your vice presidential candidate. I mean, I don't think the Republicans didn't even do that. Didn't they announce Vance before the convention? But it's just a giant pep rally. And I read a thing that said, you know, it has no impact on undecided voters because undecided voters don't watch. And it is just a very, you know, they're so choreographed and they're so with all these, you know, they have the you know, celebrities come and all this kind of stuff. It's just some version of a weird reality show.
Actually, a lot of people did watch
I
the
watched the
Democratic
Democratic
convention
because I didn't know anything
Beyonce.
about her. And yeah, so her husband, he gave an okay. And I think I said this on our last one that we talked. I think Michelle Obama, she got the biggest applause of anybody at that convention. She got more applause than Barack.
Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to have to call it quits for the day. We've run out of time, but I appreciate the very spirited discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.